philosophical sessions, we move on to the valedictory address by Professor Jose Pedro Amorim. Professor Amorim is an assistant professor at the Faculty of Psychology and Education Sciences at the University of Porto in Portugal. He is a member of the board of the Paulo Freire Institute of Portugal. Professor Amorim does research in adult education, adult literacy, history and sociology of higher education, university social responsibility, widening access and participation in higher education, and recognition of prior learning. He has participated in multiple nationally funded projects like PODER and Education for Department in Public Higher Education in Portugal. Some of his recent works include the integration of indigenous knowledge in school and the presentation of mature students in governing bodies of a Portuguese university. Welcome, sir.
Hello to you all. Are you hearing me properly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Can I share a very short presentation? Where is it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just waiting for the presentation. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes, we can see the presentation.
Great. So, first of all, many thanks for your invitation. It is a real pleasure for me and my students to be here with you. And I am here with students from this course, History of Contemporary Education. And for me and for them, it is a great pleasure and honor to be here with you. Well, it is quite difficult for me to make this valedictory address, and it is an apology I make since the beginning, because I should have participated in the conference as a whole, and unfortunately I couldn't. But in the presentation of your conference, there was a very important sentence when you state your aim, the aim of your program of teacher education, when you say that it is really important to establish teachers as reflective practitioners. And we have seen in these last presentations that we have the opportunity to see that this is a very important dimension of your work, the reflective practice. And so my comments will be much
excuse me, Professor Jose, sorry to interrupt, but your PPT is not moving on our screen. Maybe it's moving on yours. Yes. From our end, we cannot see the next PPT. It's not moving on our screen. Yeah, it is now.
It is?
It is now, yes, we can see. Thank you.
Great. I will use this way of presenting. So, when I read this, the idea of reflective practice, I remember this idea of double loop learning developed by Chris Argyris and Donald Schoen. Probably you mentioned them during the conference. And the idea is that each person has a theory in mind. And this is really important, because when we are learning, it is very important that we learn as a result of reflection upon action, And I would recall, for example, Paulo Freire, when he says that reflection without action is verbalism, and action without reflection is activism. And these two dimensions, reflection and action, are really intertwined, and it is important they are keep intertwined. And this is the concept of praxis as developed by Freire, for example. But Argyris and Chun told us that learning as a result of reflection upon theory in action, meaning the way we conceptualize action, it is even a richer way of learning. When we understand what is the theory underpinning the way we act and the way we reflect. And this is really important to keep in mind. And this led me to a very important ideas, I think, written by Paulo Freire, when he said that he was a wonder of the obvious. And this is a really powerful idea. In this book, entitled Por uma Pedagogia da Pergunta, which means For a Pedagogy of the Question, Paulo Freire and António Faúndes, this is a conversation between Paulo Freire and António Faúndes, and in the middle of the conversation, Paulo Freire says, it was through this enormous context that the World Council of Churches, he was referring to the World Council of Churches, offered me that I became a wanderer of the obvious, wandering around the world, walking through Africa, walking through Asia, Australia, New Zealand, the South Pacific Islands, traveling all over Latin America, the Caribbean, North America, Europe, walking through these parts of the world as an exile, I was able to understand my own country better. Seeing it from afar, taking distance from it, I understood myself better. Confronting myself with what was different from me, I more easily discovered my own identity. And I can tell you that this experience of Paulo Freire in Europe was really important because he understood, being here, being in Geneva, in Switzerland, that all first world as its third world, and all third world as its own first world, meaning that all rich countries have parts and some population living in poverty, in misery, and all poor countries have very wealthy people. This means that inequalities are all over the world. And this means also that it is very important that we take distance from what we think that we know the best. And when we take something as obvious, it is very important to take distance from it and to have theory helping us reflecting on this obvious object. I think that this is really important when we are training educators and teachers. And let me give you the example, and we are in this class of History of Contemporary Education, and I am working with these students the idea that history is not over, is never over, since there is humanity, since that we are here in this planet. And history is not only about the past, as if there were only a single version of the past, and if everything is already known regarding history. For example, regarding the past, regarding history, we are making an effort to understand our colonial history. And by colonial history, I mean not only the colonial past of Portugal, but also the present, because colonialism is present currently in our societies, in much more sophisticated ways very often. And so it is very important, from my point of view, to involve students in research, to ignite their curiosity regarding knowledge, regarding research as well. And so it is really important to relate very important aspects of the historiographic research with their own memories, their own schooling experiences, and also the way their relatives, their friends see the world. And let me show you just two examples. One of them is related to the 50 years we are celebrating this year, 50 years of the Carnation Revolution that put an end to 48 years of dictatorship, and it was the longest dictatorship in the 20th century Western Europe. And this year we are celebrating 50 years of the Carnation Revolution. And these students are collecting testimonies on how people see the 25th of April of 1974, the day where the Carnation Revolution took place. And when they have collected these testimonies, they, with my help, will perform a critical analysis upon these testimonies based on the historiography of education under the national dictatorship. It is really important to understand how people see nowadays the 25th of April, but also how people see the school during the dictatorship. Because there are some discourses nowadays claiming that that school, the school of those days, was the school of rigor, of good quality, and we can really dispute this kind of discourse based on history of education, and this is really important. The second example has to do with the New School movement, which was a movement established by Adolphe Ferrière and Faria de Vasconcelos and other colleagues in the first quarter of the 20th century. And these students, my students, will use the 30 principles of the New School movement to reflect upon their own schooling experience. And why is this important? Because it is really important that we become aware that most of the times ideas and movements and principles imagined in very different eras, for example, in the beginning of the 20th century, are still quite innovative today. And this is important to challenge the idea that the ideas of innovation and tradition in education, because very often we hear references to tradition in education and to innovation, for example, to things that were imagined a century or 2 centuries ago. And this is very important to have a notion of time, to have a notion of the evolution of education in the different contexts of the world. And also a very important aspect is the opportunity to compare different contexts, and comparative education is a very important domain related to the history of education. So, and as final remarks, I would say that more than sharing knowledge, it is really important to problematize knowledge and to do it collectively. And this is related also to Paulo Freire when he says that education is always a collective process. And this is really meaningful, because we are very often thinking on ways to make education a private thing, to address students individually, and this is important, of course, but it is also important to address them collectively. Otherwise, we lose the strength of the collective, and only the collective could transform our realities, transform our communities, and this is really an important aspect to stress. The final idea is also the importance of stressing the political nature of education and knowledge, because education and knowledge are always situated, and they are situated in time, they are situated in space, and this is an epistemological recognition as well. So when we are working with these students, more than try to sharing knowledge with them, we are trying to understand and make them understand and become aware of what are the theories in action they cherish, what are their political standpoints, what are the ways they read the world, also, as Paulo Freire would say. And in a very short, this would be the comments I would like to share with you. I don't know if we have time to debate, and I don't know if my students would like to also add something to this comment. Do you want to add something? Do you have a different standpoint to any of these comments I've just made? Does this make sense to you, or this is only my imagination? Well, it seems that they agree, at least in some point. If you have any answer, please, if something is not clear, please ask me. I will be really glad to try to clarify what I've just said.
Are there any questions for sir? Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Jose. I think this is a lot of, the students are thinking about the issues that you have raised, and I'm sure there will be queries, and which you allow, we will be in touch with you over email. In one concise email, we can share our students' queries and their observations. So thank you so much for your address.
Thank you.
Now I would like to request Professor Shirley Joseph to come up on the stage to give the vote of thanks. Thank you.
helmet.
Yeah, no, please.
Okay. It's my unique honor to close this rather packed day with a vote of thanks. I'm not well. I think my sound must be coming through like this. This has been a learning day, emblematic of the purpose of introducing our students to the field of education from the vantage of research questions. Our particular program has no research methodology in it. So this is one way when we sort of expand our purposes and think of something more. How this framework of research informs various aspects of understanding childhood, learning, and schools was presented through a series of very insightful presentations in both the plenary and the valedictory session. I discern, to borrow Professor Bart McGettrick's phrase, I discern that he brought home to us the realities of Palestine and children of migrants in a baby's warehouse through photographs as a mode of inquiry, and said how discernment is as important as measured evidence. By placing love, justice, and hope as central aims of education, he refocused us on how to pivot educational research onto relationships as the backdrop or the backrock of learning. Professor Farooqi and Dr. Geeta Menon brought focus on autoethnographic studies in how intersectionalities of politics, economics, society, and education help to locate and represent the child learners and the multiple childhoods they experience. Dr. Menon also shared how curricula needs to be contextual and culturally indexed. Her research context, Rohingyas in Cox's Bazar, studies in Afghanistan, Hardoi in UP, and Sri Lanka, through these locations, she reaffirms the unique challenges that the space of education, she posits the space of education as central to childhood in all its diversity, as presented in these unique contexts. However, for curriculum to be formulated, the approach needs to be a bottom-up one, which requires very nuanced understanding of the context of children and their unique histories. Anita Charles, closest to our own aims, posited how professionally trained teachers are in best position to understand and engage with children through using action research to figure the hurdles to inclusive education. Part 2 of this day were 3 parallel sessions called strangely technical sessions. These were policy and curriculum negotiating diverse childhoods and reflections on learning processes. Many dissertations and projects, these were really student projects and dissertations that were presented today based on their field work. And there were many interesting ones. One that caught my eye was Deepthi Goel's study of factors leading to teacher burnout and its effect in schools working towards progressivist ideology of education. Okay, something we think is so good and teachers should be so happy about, which is talking about how burnout happens in that context. We also had our very own Bhavya presenting her play project, which is part of our curriculum. Ronika Budiraja, one of our ex-students, talked of gender portrayal in pop music videos. And she made a comparative study between India and Canada. So those are some of the kind of interesting kinds of work being done. Nascent work, it's not really research, but this was a sort of space to talk about these things. And finally, Professor Jose Amorim's quite fascinating valedictory presentation, I must say. He brings home to us how the whole business of education is one of continuously thinking through things. It's not one of accepting ideas for what they are. In presenting ideas such as continues to influence our worldview even today, by making us understand that and to present that in the current context, he gave us examples of how two movements, the Carnation Revolution and the New School movement, can be taken up by students as projects where you actually go back and ask people what they thought of that particular time, or what was happening, how did they understand that moment, how did they understand the new education as they received it, and through the sort of 30 principles or whatever, not very sure of this particular curriculum, how did it actually work out? So that would have been, that's something exciting and so very real. And this, I thought, he says it's in a way to reflect on their own schooling experiences, to question ideas of tradition. And this is something so close to home nowadays, where we are being told that there is something called traditional knowledge, and it's something way beyond, and it's not as though it's just got reconstructed maybe in the 1990s, and being regurgitated as something very ancient. So I think it gives us a lot of food for thought. It makes us feel that we belong to a shared universe of ideas where we can borrow and draw strength and know how to move on. And most particularly, I like the fact that he talked about how to get students to think of their theories of action, to come up with their theories of action and their political statements, and how do they read this world. And sometimes one gets so jaded, particularly since verbalism is so heavy in the Indian educational context, that I think this should be something that should light us, that should help us in our further endeavors as we teach, etc. I didn't want to make this very long speech, but my real job is to thank everybody, particularly Professor Joseph, our principal, because I think, of course, she'll be supportive, that's her role, but she's been a very important pillar of academic support. I think the fact that we're having these international, I think even in the BLA department, some of our international ventures, as it were, academically have started really because of her instigating us, sort of telling us this is the way ahead, we need to be doing some of these things which she wouldn't have otherwise done. So I think, and I'm particularly very happy that it's, to have academic settings, to do things academically. Usually we did a little bit of, dance and drama, and those are the kinds of things these podiums were used for. Now it's being used in a very different way. So I think we're very grateful for that, ma'am. It's a very good thing happening here. Alka, of course, is our TIC who has organized this whole thing, along with Najia, Bhavna, and Jijo, but actually everybody except me in the faculty were helping her out with it. The student council, we have Ritika and Manya, take a bow, yeah, who've been there. There are a lot of other people. I counted the numbers. They gave me a list of people, And I said, but weren't there more people? And they said, yes, there were volunteers, ma'am. I said, no, write down however number of volunteers. So we've got a range of committees, like 150 people have been putting their heads together for this event. So that's a lot of numbers. And I think Alka, you managed to pull up quite a coup to get so many students, or maybe as somebody showed her badge and said, you know, she's roped us in this way. So there are all these students, Manya and Ria and Priyanka and Manvi, and everybody knows who's been doing whatever, and I'm sure they're feeling very pleased with themselves. We'll just put up the list on everywhere, so that everybody knows whoever has done it, and I want to include all the volunteer names because they're not here today. So I don't want to read out the names. I'll just give you an insight. Refreshment committee has 2 people and 28 volunteers. So I think they need to be named. So they're not named here, but let me take this moment to thank some important people. For those who conceptualized this idea, while I named some of them, they're on the poster. Dr. Vishaka Kumar was with us, and she was somebody who was part of the conceptualization of this particular conference, so I think we should mention her. She was the teacher here at that time. That's good work. Tabir Society of College has been taking photographs. We thank you for that. And Anthony has been taking photographs. We thank you for that. And we thank the technical staff of Gaurav, Thomas, do I have to take surnames? Gaurav Kumar, Thomas Philippos, Jay Krishnan, Pavan, Mukesh, Kailash, and Francis, Savio, and Rajinder for your immense support for today and tomorrow. There's another event coming up tomorrow. You can't mention Professor Sandra Joseph without mentioning Alan, who is her right hand and who supports us in everything else. And our canteen, Reggie and Ansi, and their team for all the good food you got today. Thank you, everybody. I also want to take a mention of all the people who've shared their thoughts with us today. So we've had, in the morning, we've had Anita Charles, Farah Faruqi, Bart McGettrick, Geeta Menon, Gunjan Sharma. Then we've had Prabhat Rai, Annie Koshi, Wendy Bignold, Dr. Radhika Menon, Professor Jesse Abraham, Dr. Mona Sedwal, for all your absolutely valuable insights and sharing that you've done with us today, and for the students of the BLA department. On behalf of faculty and students, I thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words, Dr. Shirley. Now I would request the presenters to kindly collect their certificates from the registration desk. Please make 3 lines according to the venues that you were presenting. That is the Thevenet Hall, the MPH1, and the MPH2. And furthermore, we invite everyone to join us for tea outside the Thevenet Hall. Thank you.